I was sent another video critiquing evolution, or as it was called, Lievolution. Gee, I wonder if this is going to be biased or not.
Used to be an atheist, and I used to be a strong believer in evolution. I'd post on pretty much every video related to the topic, whether it's for or against it.
You posted on every video you found? Well, then you must be well versed in the subject. You wouldn't be posting if you didn't know anything about it, would you? I'm sure these will be well thought out questions on the theory of evolution. Oh, and before I begin, it was suggested to me by my scientific advisor that I should break this into multiple parts because there's too much wrong to fit into one video. So, here are just the first 6.
But recently I'm starting to kind of question my beliefs, and I have 12 basic questions that I would like to ask every evolutionist. Number 1. What kind of evolutionist are you? There are 2 basic types, the gradualist and the punctuated equilibriumist. The gradualist believes that we all evolved gradually on various different phases, like small changes over millions and billions of years. The punctuated equilibrium believes that it's kind of hard to explain, but it's basically just we stayed the same for a long time, but some earthquake or something else happened, and then we started changing rapidly, and then we went back to changing slowly and rapidly and rapidly and slowly again. Now, both sides of this battle seem to kind of say that they're right, but they're kind of complete opposites of each other. So what kind of evolutionist are you?
No, they are not complete opposites. They still have the basic idea that things change over time, and natural selection chooses the best fit to survive. Imagine riding a bike. You're usually moving at a constant rate, but sometimes due to outside forces, like moving up or down a hill, you will change speed and move faster or slower. Evolution can speed up if there's an increase in environmental pressure to adapt, say, some kind of evolutionary arms race between predator and prey. Or it can slow if an organism is so well adapted to its environment it doesn't have to change. Sharks, for example, have not needed much evolutionary change in millions of years. As for your earthquake comment, I guess it's technically true. It could be a factor in some cases of evolution. 2 groups of the same organism could be separated by a natural event and proceed down different evolutionary paths. Or, a major change in the environment could necessitate evolutionary changes. But earthquakes themselves really have nothing to do with how evolution works in general.
Number 2. How did male and female evolve? The first organisms, according to the evolutionists, were asexual bacteria. But how did asexual bacteria turn into something sexual? It's not necessarily a very easy change. You have to evolve a perfect reproductive system and the ability to exchange DNA, the ability to make sperm, eggs, etc., etc.
Sex evolved from sharing genetic information. Sharing genetics would result in even more diversity, so more fit creatures could edge out the less diverse ones. Eventually, this sharing of genetic information would become specialized, creating new life forms that had specialized roles, i.e., male and female.
Was that first organism a hermaphrodite, a male, or a female? If it was a hermaphrodite, it would be just fine, but if it were a male or a female, it would either die out, or on the other side of the world, there would have to be a male or a female of the opposite sex to evolve for it to mate with.
Technically, the first organisms would be female, since the female is the one that gives birth. Organisms sharing information in which one gives birth, but both are able to. In fact, there are currently all-female creatures right now. In Aspidoscealius uniparens, or whiptail lizard, the females reproduce with parthenogenesis, no males needed.
Number 3. Come to think of it, why would life even want to reproduce? Wouldn't it make more sense for it to just live forever?
Organisms do not last forever. They break down and sometimes die. The ones that have the drive and the ability to reproduce are the ones that carry on, while the ones that have no drive to reproduce end up as a genetic dead end. A need to reproduce has been bred into organisms because the ones that don't have that desire are outbred by the organisms that do.
Is the desire of evolution, is it centered around the desire of the individual, the desire of the species as a whole, or just no desire at all?
There's no desire for evolution. That's like asking what the desire for gravity is. Simply, the organisms that are best able to survive are the ones that survive. Individuals have a desire to breed. And if an individual has advantages that make it better suited to survive and breed than others of its species, then it will be more likely to pass on those advantages by surviving and breeding.
Number 4. How did life even begin in the first place? This is pretty much the most important part of all of it. It's the most important part of atheism, the most important part of evolution. Yet there's still not really a tested answer.
We don't know. We have several hypotheses that are possible, but we don't know how it occurred yet. But what we don't have is any evidence for an intelligent creator being as the one starting it all off, so there's no reason to assume one.
The only way to know for sure how life was created or formed is to go back in time with a time machine, and every attempt to reproduce life has been unsuccessful. And come to think of it, if they were to reproduce life, it would actually prove intelligent design. It would prove that life only comes from intelligence, in this case, a scientist.
Just because a person is able to do something, that does not mean nature cannot. In high school, we combined hydrogen and oxygen to create water. Just because we did that, that doesn't mean that all water was only created by humans. And scientists do not have supernatural powers. If they were able to create life in a lab, as we believe it began with self-replicating molecules, they would be using natural processes to create it, showing that life does not need a supernatural creator being to exist.
And now there are some evolutionists who are saying that abiogenesis has nothing to do with evolution. But that's like saying gasoline has nothing to do with an automobile.
And those evolutionists would be right. Evolution is how existing things change and explains the diversity of life, not how life began in the first place. A better analogy would be, going back to my water example, saying plumbing and fluid dynamics couldn't work until we knew exactly how hydrogen and oxygen combined. But the aqueduct existed long before our understanding of how elements combined into molecules. Too bad the Romans didn't know not to use lead when making their pipes.
Number 5. How did life evolve on land? Think about it. When the first land creature walked out of the ground, did it have lungs or did it have gills? If it had lungs, it couldn't have breathed underwater. If it had gills, it would have suffocated on land. And since it was already on water, why would it need to evolve lungs and gills at the same time? It's a mess.
The best explanation is that lungs evolved slowly. A water-based creature could move to the land briefly to escape predators or take advantage of an untapped resource like plants already on the land. Or, in times of drought, move from one deoxygenated pool of water to another. The ones that could spend longer and longer time out of the water would thrive, passing on the ability to stay above water for longer and longer until they could survive both in and out of the water. Many species of fish have an air-filled swim bladder that helps them with their buoyancy. Some of these fish, known as physiostome, fill and take air through their mouth at the surface. It's not a stretch to think how these air bladders could slowly evolve into lungs, responsible for taking oxygen for breathing, if these creatures started spending more time above and out of the water. Eventually, they would become so specialized, depending only on lungs, they could not go back to living in the water.
If you consider that there's more water on Earth than land, then wouldn't it make more sense just to stay underwater?
Not at all. Being able to escape from predators to the safer land, or access food sources without competition, would make moving to land a very useful process.
Number 6. How do you explain polystrate fossils? Polystrate fossils are fossils buried between 2 layers of rock rather than just one. Now in the evolutionist model, each layer of rock takes millions of years to form, and a polystrate fossil crosses 2. I have one right here. It's see this? It's a picture of a tree. A tree buried between 2 layers of rock.
Okay, this has been explained since the 19th century. The first thing you might notice is the tree is not made of wood, but rock. That's our first clue. A tree can become buried upright in sedimentary rock. It fossilizes, meaning the organic portions of the tree will become mineralized. This new mineralized structure is harder than sedimentary rock around it, which can be partially worn away, leaving the fossilized tree behind. New rock layers will rise up around the tree above the older rock layers. Eventually, the tree will be buried under several different rock layers, making it polystrata.
I don't have one with me right now, but I've seen pictures of a rock, of a tree that's been buried between 2 rocks and it's upside down. Do you think that someone turned the tree upside down and then let it wait for millions of years? Or do you think a global flood would have been a much better explanation?
A global flood is not a better explanation because there's no evidence for one, and the evidence we would expect from one is conspicuously missing, like some kind of disruption in Chinese records which were meticulously kept at the time. Or at least a footnote saying, gee, the water's getting higher. A local flood, a thing we do have evidence of occurring, could uproot a tree and bury it in sedimentary rock, even upside down. So, we have a natural explanation for this, no supernatural events required. Well, those are the first 6 questions answered. Stay tuned for next time. Maybe I'll have something that will give me pause. Oh, come on. Like, all my puns are going to be great. Anyway, next time I'll continue answering his questions.